particularly interesting for me because I come from that sort of old-fashioned background of IP being represented predominantly by patents, trademarks, copyrights, but at a stage before people knew very much about the internet. And so catching up as you go along is a really interesting exercise when you're quite young. But as a 94-year-old colleague of mine in England said, originally from South Africa, he said, Fidelma, I gave up doing patent work when they moved into this new biological end of things, and I just couldn't stand having to learn something new all over again. So I feel a little bit like that when it comes to online platform services. I know what they are in general, but I wouldn't like to be briefed to go into court and explain to a judge who knows even less than I do what they actually mean and what they're all about. So this afternoon's session, I think, has been a real learning curve from my point of view, and I suspect that quite a lot of you have actually come across new things and learned quite a lot. We have now about 15 minutes. I'm sorry I was so strict with all of them. Well, not really, I'm not sorry at all. But we do now have about 10 or 15 minutes, and I always try to encourage people really to ask the really difficult questions that you want to know about, because here are three sitting ducks. They don't cost you a penny. They know everything that you ever want to know about the problems you're likely to meet. And the only thing I would ask is that you say who you are and you address your question to one or other of them. Who would like to start? Yes. I'm going to now, because I'm starting here, I'm going to move backwards rather than hopping all over the room. So
Fred Logue, and my question is for Vishnu.
Can everybody hear? Otherwise I'll get people to stand up so that you all know what we're talking about. Please stand up.
Well, firstly, I just pick you up. I don't think that monitoring online of activity online is necessarily legal. It just hasn't been found to be illegal yet. But my question is on the OSP issue. Would you think that extension of the private copying exemption could solve all these problems? In that that it seems to me that the use of OSPs to enforce copyright is kind of similar to what the private exemption was designed for blank CDs, MP3 players, etc. And that the cost saving for the mechanisms for enforcement could be used to levy the profits from advertising and solve everything in one foul sweep.
Have you heard that question? Essentially it asks whether there would be quite a simple mechanism for enforcement by adopting the private copying enforcement mechanism and then taking the funds to meet any liability from advertising sources. So, Vishnu.
It seems that often OSP's success on the internet in terms of their business model, I suppose the premise is that they're making money off advertising, and hence they should be responsible for that. I think I would say that making OSP's advertising profits as a target seems too easy, perhaps. Just because OSPs also serve an important function, as they did in the year 2000, which is to serve as a distributor of content. So I'm not persuaded that just going with targeting the advertising is necessarily going to,
But should their profits be dealt with in any other way than any other infringer's profits? I mean, if the source of their profits is advertising income, why should it be treated in a different way to anybody else's advertising income?
Right.
I mean, most people would say, I'm making this available, socks or clothes or whatever, for the benefit of the public, if you want to be really cynical.
Right.
But so why should they be immune, or their profits be immune, or their income stream be immune?
Right. So I think direct infringement. So if OSPs were in the business of direct infringement, actually creating and then hosting infringing content, I would agree with that. Here's a case of secondary infringement, where they simply host infringing content of third parties. And so, I do wonder if OSP should have enhanced monitoring obligations, but I think that the general principle that they ought not to be liable for hosting infringing content should still continue to apply. So I wonder if broader exemptions should in fact be available. So I would personally expand the exemptions under the e-commerce directive, but once a minimum threshold for diligence or for monitoring has in fact been taken place.
Okay. More questions? Thank you very much, both of you. More questions, and I'm moving back. Don't be shy. Surely it can't be that their content was so self-explanatory that you have no questions? Yes, thank you.
Yes, my name is Barbara Clancy. I work
Can you also stand up a little, because you have a nice gentle voice?
I just wanted to talk about, when you're talking about online and OSPs and people that make content available online, and be they individuals or be they constructive companies or OSPs, I suppose the industry I work in, the damage is already done within an hour, let's say, because I work also in broadcasting. So if there's online footage of a match, for instance, a football match or a rugby match, and somebody taps into that via whatever means, and they push it up on an online site via VPN or whatever it may be, they make it available. Maybe one individual we're sitting in South Africa in a sitting room. For me, I suppose, the enforcement side of it, if the OSPs are basically forced to monitor that, and you say the threshold is there, for me in the industry I work in, enforcement means that it has to be done to avoid damage, because there's live matches taking place of coverage of football matches, whatever it may be. The damage is already done within 2 or 3 hours. And I can never get satisfaction from these people contacting them, trying to get them to remove the content without sophisticated expense being put in place and structures, a company that enables us to do that and gets in contact with them. And we have to spend a lot of money enforcing those rights by getting sophisticated software, and people are able to work that sophisticated software and to apply it to remove that content, either physically, technologically, and also engaging with the OSP or the people that make that available. So I'm talking about enforcement that depends on what type of commercial model you have. If that commercial model you have is basically being damaged in the moment, then it's very difficult to actually, there's various ways of commercialization, and you're talking about the damage being done, the losses, that's done within a couple of minutes or an hour, it's instant. Yeah. So how do you deal with that, without expending enough that money on enforcing it and also defending yourself,
Well, would you like to say who you'd like to answer that interesting question?
Well, whoever feels they're basically in a position to, because that's what I'm up against.
Yes, it's a very practical problem. I mean, one of the most practical problems we've heard, actually.
Yes, so that's one instance.
So who would like to tackle that, or several of you like to tackle it?
So is your question that so how do sort of rights holders who see their content being infringed in a very rapid fashion, how do they sort of, who bears the costs and expense of actually reacting to infringement where the damage is caused very quickly? Is that your question?
Exactly.
Yes, but are you more concerned about your broadcast of somebody else's rights? In other words, that's the platform, and somebody then infringes, and what is your liability in that context?
Yeah, I have rights, for instance.
Yes.
I'm the rights holder in the broadcasting copyright, but I also license that exclusively to other people within other jurisdictions, to a TV channel, for instance. So it's not only my rights that are being infringed, it's also the licensed exclusive rights that I give them. And in the moment, we try everything we can, as I said, with employing a service provider that can technologically remove that the broadcasts. but also writing to them, engaging with that OSP, engaging with that person that's putting the content up, asking them to remove it, asking them to remove trademarks. We try everything. But ultimately, we're limited. You know, and the OSP sometimes respond, and it always depends on the OSP. It depends on the person. Sometimes.
Okay, I think that's very, very clear. All right. Would you like to deal with that, Sanjay?
So I think I think in practice, so like studies have shown that OSPs seem to be actually overzealous in taking down content, because after all, their whole exclusion of liability is premised on as soon as they become aware of information, that they act quickly and expeditiously to take down content. So, so if anything, the way the e-commerce directive safe harbors are set up, there's an incentive to act too quickly, not too slowly. I'm sure in practice, you may be seeing instances where OSPs are slow to act, or they refuse to act, or they think that your claim is invalid. So I guess the question for me is in two parts. The first is, should OSPs have to work with you directly to take down content, or should you be dealing, get say a court order, and then have me take down content on the back of that court order? Or should it be that, like me as the OSP and you as a rights holder need to have that real-time conversation? One. Two, I think it's fair, as you say, that rights holders often go to great expense and inconvenience to actually identify infringers and to take action. But there's also the case that OSPs themselves also have large large overheads. I know for one that OSPs have large copyright takedown teams sitting there for exactly things like this. So there are costs being incurred on both sides, so both rights holders and for OSPs. So I wonder if in the future, and I think the technology is actually becoming available, like the Content ID program, where if you as a rights holder upload content onto the Content ID program, and the software will automatically match that content against potentially infringing content and take it down immediately in real time. So that's there are sort of arguments on due process and so on, but I think the technology is coming to a stage when it's possible for your football match infringer to have his content taken down in real time. So I see going forward that the costs of taking down infringing content actually coming down, both for rights holders and for OSPs.